Donald Trump doesn't care if you live or die. In fact, if you are opposed to him, he really prefers one of those options, and he's made it clear throughout his entire presidency. This administration is executing Americans in the street, so it is no surprise that he doesn't care about the mass carnage that will come from the gutting of the EPA that Donald Trump announced today, or at least tried to announce, but he could barely read through most of it while he was also falling asleep. And at the parts in which Donald Trump wasn't displaying his cognitive decline, he decided he wanted to go to war with President Obama, whose environmental regulations he announced he was gutting. But it is not the only time that he and former President Obama came in conflict. It actually is what started some of the questions from the press conference today. Now, we have a lot to get into with regards to Trump not being able to read, some Epstein questions at the end, but because Trump was directly targeting Obama, I feel like we got to start with this question and the ridiculous answer he gave.
President, have you fired or disciplined that staffer who posted the video from your account that included the Obamas?
No, I haven't. That was a video on, as you know, voter fraud. And fairly long video, and they had a little piece and had to do with the Lion King. It's been very well, it's been shown all over the place long before that was posted. But that was a very strong, and I'm sure you saw it, a very strong piece on voter fraud. And the piece that you're talking about was all over the place many times, I believe for years. Yeah, please.
Does Donald Trump think that we were upset that the video was referencing the Lion King? Do you think we're upset about copyright infringement? I'm not a lawyer for Disney. We're upset that the post was racist. Does he not get that? Well, clearly he doesn't. He lives in an alternate reality. Does he think that does he even know that we were upset? It's hard to understand what does and does not get relayed to Donald Trump because of the yes men around him. It's why members of the media that have the opportunity to push Donald Trump should, because it's never happening otherwise. No one in his administration is telling him no. It's why Donald Trump, when actually getting pushback, like he did in this clip right here, asked about how this huge cut to environmental protections is going to help anyone, why he just kind of trailed it off and said nothing before we got to the moment he just couldn't read.
Thank you so much for taking the questions. What do you tell Americans who are concerned that the $1.3 trillion in savings does come at a cost to public health and the environment based on science?
I tell them don't worry about it because it has nothing to do with public health. This was all a scam, a giant scam. This was a ripoff of the country by Obama and Biden. And let's say Obama started it and got it rolling. And a terrible ripoff. They'll have more money to spend for health care, if you look at it. Now they can go out and spend it on something that's meaningful. And nobody's doing more for health care than the Republican Party. And that starts with the fact that prescription drugs are going to be coming down at numbers that nobody's ever seen before. They're falling. You know, we were paying the highest prices in the world by far, sometimes by 10 times more than other countries. Now we're going to be paying whatever the lowest price is anywhere in the world. We're going to be paying that. It's called favored nations, most favored nations. And I think it's the biggest thing to happen in this world. The world of medicine, prescription drugs, ever. There's never been anything like it, you know?
So Donald Trump says not stopping pollution makes Americans healthier because we're going to invest that money that we don't have into health care that you're cutting. Is that the answer? And the most favored nation policy, which Donald Trump doesn't understand, saying that it's quite frankly the greatest thing that ever happened in the history of the globe, and it's a great globe, and it's so big. I would like a reporter to ask Donald Trump what he thinks it means. What is that policy? What do you think is happening? I think that more reporters will need to ask follow-up questions, but two, ask Donald Trump to define very basic terms that he consistently uses. We treat him like he knows what he's saying. He does not, and I'd love to see a little bit of pushback because he really squirms, but someone who gave Donald Trump some pushback before we get into the moment that he couldn't read was Barack Obama. President Obama wrote on Twitter today, the Trump administration repealed the endangerment finding, the ruling that served as the basis for limits on tailpipe emissions and power plant rules. Without it, we'll be less safe, less healthy, and less able to fight climate change. Also, the fossil fuel industry can make even more money. That is what Donald Trump announced today. Rich guys are going to get richer. Your air, your water, your community will be polluted. Full stop. That's it. And that's what Donald Trump has happily done throughout his entire administration. Hurt us to serve the wealthiest. All the while, he continues to crumble and show us how weak he is, which is what we got as Donald Trump read off some of this announcement. And he didn't really read it off. The reading was a struggle.
For a lot less money. In 2009, Barack Hussein Obama, his EPA designated fossil fuels such as oil, gas, and other things.
Journalist Aaron Rupar also pointed out that Trump looks like he's about to fall asleep standing behind Lee Zeldin during what was just a sleepy, a tired, just a gross and sad display of Donald Trump at this press conference today. He is a weak, weak man. And he really just shows it to us every single day. And we're going to get into more of this press conference, so please do stick around, because Donald Trump gave his thoughts on mail-in ballots, Epstein's Island, and windmills. So it only got worse. But I think we could see as he kind of struggled to get through the words, and he was like, fossil fuels and other stuff, and it's great, and we're winning, and energy. He's just tired. I'm sure Trump does need glasses, and he just thinks they'll make him look weak. That is kind of maybe what the rest of this presidency will be about, which is why if you want any hope that this ends, stick around for what I have to say at the end of this. Donald Trump's most blatant moment of like weakness to me, most obvious moment of weakness, and I've kind of talked about this a couple of times, is when the Florida Panthers Stanley Cup champion team was at the White House a couple of weeks ago. Donald Trump went up to these really obviously great athletes and said, "Wow, you're so strong and so big and so athletic. Well, I have the United States military, so you don't look so big compared to me," which is the best example that Donald Trump is just so insecure about his physical decline, his cognitive decline as well. He's always been that way. He's not assured of himself. We know that much. But Trump, I think, is really focused on the rest of this presidency just being something to kind of fulfill his wishes for his legacy and to set himself up the way that he wants to be remembered. And it's why he gets a participation trophy every day. It's why he wants to build an arch. It's why he wants to put his name on more buildings and so on and such. So my hope for any good election outcome, any defeat of Trump and MAGA, comes from my belief that Donald Trump kind of wants to end his political career by saying the Republican Party was falling apart before me, and now that I'm gone, it's not the same. He doesn't want to leave his successor to carry on and maybe overshadow him or whatever. I think he just wants to see it all fall apart. Now, right now during the midterms, Donald Trump, of course, wants to hold on to power, and it's why he had to say this about mail-in ballots.
Citizenship, that's about a 99% one with Republicans, about 86% with Democrats, except Democrat politicians because they cheat on elections. And then you have no mail-in ballots. And there would be no mail-in ballots, very important. You know, we're the only country in the world that does a system like we do. We're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots. The way we do this is unbelievable. It guarantees cheating. So it's no mail-in ballots with the exception of disability, illness, military, or if you're traveling, you can get an exemption. You know, if you happen to be out of the country for a good reason, you can have an exemption. So with
I would like us to focus more on every time Donald Trump attacks America and use it and bank it as a response to whenever we hear all of these conservatives say, oh, the left hates America. Donald Trump is criticizing our elections. He's saying that they're terrible. He's saying that they're not secure. He wants to take them over. He wants to change our way of government, our way of life to better suit him. Of course, to steal elections and to intimidate people out of participating in our democracy. But I think we should call that out for what it is. It's like an attack on America, that Donald Trump hates how we do things. That is just a blatant admission of what he's after. And it does, again, show how scared he is, how worried he is, and how he knows what's coming in the midterms, as long as Democrats do put together a plan. You know, I saw Alyssa Slotkin today ask an ICE goon if she thought it was possible and if Donald Trump would order ICE to go to polling locations. And he said, well, I don't think Donald Trump would do that. And she said, no, not the question. Would you do it if he said to? Didn't answer. So Democrats put together a plan on that, because that's a pretty big admission of what they're after. And speaking of admissions, I promised you a little Epstein conversation. My God, was this bad.
Yeah, please.
Mr. President, were you aware that Secretary of Commerce visited Epstein's Island, and do you continue to have...
No, I wasn't aware of it. No, I didn't. I actually haven't spoken to him about it. I wasn't. But from what I hear, he was there with his wife and children. And I guess in some cases, some people were. I wasn't. I was never there. Somebody will someday say that. I was never there. Yeah, please.
Donald Trump's snap reaction to Howard Lutnick being on Epstein's Island is to go, well, I never went to the island, and someday someone's going to say that I did. What? Someday someone's going to say that you did? Why? Why would they say that? Did you? There's nothing that makes me believe that Donald Trump went to Epstein's Island more than Donald Trump saying, I never went to the island, don't make that accusation, but someone will eventually. It sounds like you went to the island. There is so much more in these files. If what we've already seen is what they're maybe kind of okay with us seeing, just imagine how bad it gets. And Donald Trump's going to continue, I think, to give away the game, especially as his mind goes like it did here.
Secretary Zeldin knows about these wind turbines they're trying to bring to New York. Judge is allowing them to be rebuilt right near your hometown in Jamaica, Queens. They're being called a national security threat for air traffic coming into the airport. What could you do to make sure these things
Well,
don't
we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen, and we've basically stopped all windmills in this country. It's the most expensive energy you can get. They're all made in China, a little bit in Germany, but mostly in China. and we're putting them all over our fields and ruining the fields and killing the birds and all of this. And the environmentalists say they like them, but they really are a tremendous eyesore. They've ruined. Europe has gone, as you know, it's gone to Europe isn't even recognizable anymore between immigration and because of environmental things like the windmills, which are taking over. The people hate them. The energy is by far the most expensive. And we're fighting very hard to make sure that they don't get built. I hope we don't have one built during my administration.
I love the idea that cognitively declining Donald Trump has two great enemies as the racist fascist that he is. We hate the immigrants and the windmills as well. Europe is unrecognizable because of immigrants and windmills. What a crazy combination. Just a fucking pathetic person. Ugh, it's so bad. And we're going to continue to call it out.